We're here with Heather Chapman, who is the second prize winner of the Tower Poetry Competition 2024. Congratulations, Heather.
Thank you.
So to start off, maybe you could tell us a bit about your journey in poetry, or how you started writing, or...
Yeah, I think, well, originally I started writing short fiction and short stories, and then I kind of gradually transitioned into poetry. I think I'm interested in poetry for its kind of concision, so often I would start with a short story and then kind of cut it down, and it got shorter and shorter until eventually it was a poem. And now I write poetry quite a lot because it's quite good with school. I don't really have time to write a longer piece, but a poem I can sort of sit down and edit in a short period of time, which is really nice.
That's really interesting that you started with short fiction, because one of the most notable features of your prize-winning poem is its form. It's very, it's a rhyming poem. It's in a very tight, strict form. How did you end up settling on that?
Well, I really like sestinas. They're some of my favourite poetry forms. So I like to kind of play around with that a bit. It's sort of half a sestina in that it uses, instead of repeating words, it repeats sort of sounds. So yeah, when you sort of read it out loud, it becomes more obvious, but it's not so obvious on the page, which I kind of like. And it's quite fun to write because it often feels like a puzzle. Like if you have the repeated sounds, it sort of forms a skeleton that I can then build the poem around, which I really like.
What was the process like of writing this poem?
Well, it went through several drafts. The first few drafts were not very good, and I took lines from the first few and then kind of rewrote it several times with the same repeated words. So it kind of got built up very gradually, kind of a couple of lines at a time. So it was quite a slow process.
Is that typical of your way of writing, working?
I think it's quite specific to when I'm writing sestina-style poems or poems that have a sort of set form. I feel like for kind of free verse poems, I often write sort of one draft that's very, very long, and they're all in prose, and then I have to cut it down and add the line breaks. But for poems that have a form, it's often kind of, it has to be just right to get it to fit the rhyme or the repeated words, so those take several drafts.
Makes sense. It does feel very, very polished, very honed. I also wanted to ask, with this poem and more broadly, what your influences are, or what you look to for inspiration.
I guess I read a lot of modern poetry, and I'm also interested in sort of the classics as well, I guess. I really like Shakespeare, so I'm interested a lot in that, although I don't really write in a sort of Shakespearean sonnet type style. I really like modern poets like Richard Siken. He writes a lot about kind of sort of elegiac poems, which I find is a theme that comes up a lot. I often write about kind of, elegiac poems, or sort of poems about people who are immortal, like vampires, so I suppose kind of one or the other often comes up.
Can you have an elegy for someone who's immortal?
I guess so. I feel like that's kind of what I was going for in a way, in that sort of my poem is about the two vampires sort of reflecting on life and sort of the present moment, and how time feels kind of different and altered for someone who's going to live forever as opposed to a sort of a mortal person.
Was there any vampire fiction or media that inspired the poem?
Kind of, yeah. There's a video game called Baldur's Gate 3 that features a vampire, which I was quite inspired by. And also there's a vampire novel called Carmilla that was written before Dracula, which I was also very interested by. It has a more of a kind of romantic element compared to Dracula, which I thought I wanted to kind of carry forward and hint at in my poem as well.
Great. So at this point, could we invite you to read your poem?
Yeah. Two vampires cut each other's hair in front of the mirror. And you're gentle, though I'd wanted an execution, the sibilant winking cut. And greedy, ambitious for the finite, the slow dropping of hair, something like grief or grief's obedience, the fall so dutifully following the knife. You turn your chin, test your profile. A portion of night swells the mirror where your features should reunite. You pretend not to care. You're cutthroat on sentiment, sway you love our daily patterns, the bloom of joy after dinner, the bitterness souring your gums. For how long have I studied the shape of your mouth, its disrepair, pink and honest in its destruction? You swear you're kind. Only once did I not believe you, night before Christmas, the streets candied with lights. Canines botching a cut between tendons, you'd laughed in obituary, suddenly vicious, suddenly nocturnal, and I'd wished for a cool glass to return your image softer. But it's late, and your hair is so easy in my hands. I feel like a habitant in myself. I could own my mouth, tame the night that comforts my outline. Your offcuts scatter across my lap, accidental ingredients for religion, like the coins or the bloodied calf. But you get nervous around the eternal, prefer to imagine yourself fragile, cut from a finite sky, both of us heir to nothing. Now you're talking about a fortnight in the 1300s, when your new overbite still makes you nervous. Time's orbit forgets to clasp, your old medieval accent rises bold and green, this ignition of vowels, everything already turning into something else. Nothing is rare, not even the terror, second-hand, clear-cut. We're obedient to no one. The mirror neglects the pattern of blood at your cuticles, bitter and definite. You turn to smile at me, and I'm glad I do not have to share.